Al Showman.
Very nice, very nice. Don't know what the hell it was, but very nice. Now, I thought tonight that we'd play on the safe side, so we won't bother with my act for a start. What we'll do instead is we'll all get together and we'll have one big party. Everybody agree? Yeah! Right, that's what we'll do then. We'll have a ball. Well, we might as well have two. They're only little. Now, in order to get us into the party spirit, we're going to open up with some community hymn singing. Are you ready? Which hymn do you want, love? Him on the big drum. Oh. Some community hymn singing then, starting with Christians Awake, or the Jews will get your money. Can you play some community hymn singing music, please, A.B.? In Dublin's fair city, where the girls are so pretty, I first set my eyes on sweet Molly Malone as she wheeled her wheelbarrow through the streets broad and narrow, crying cockles and muzzles, alive, alive, oh, come on, alive, alive, oh, alive, alive, oh, crying cockles and muzzles, alive, alive, oh. Shall I do an Irish joke instead? No. Right, I'll do two. Now, Mr. Murphy died, so they were having a wake for Murphy. And one of his oldest friends went upstairs with Murphy's widow to have a last look at him in his coffin. And he said, "Oh, doesn't he look peaceful? Doesn't he look peaceful? He's got a smile on his face." She says, "Yes, he died in his sleep. He doesn't know he's dead yet." He said, "Oh, be Jabus, when he wakes up, the shock will kill him." He said, "But I don't like this. I don't like the coffin on the floor like that. It's not dignified. The coffin should be raised off the floor." She said, "But I've got nothing to put it on." He said, "You don't need anything special to put a coffin on. You can put a chair at one end and a chair at the other end and a chair in the middle. That's all you need. You don't need anything special." "But I don't like that. It's not dignified." She said, "Well, I'll get the chairs and we'll do it now." And she stood at the top of the stairs and she shouted down to all the people at the wake. She says, "Can I have 3 chairs for Murphy?" And they all went, "Hip, hip, hooray!" They all went, "Hip, hip." Now, I've got 1 or 2 at the front not laughing now. It's not your fault, it's not your fault. I forgot to tell you, see, before I started, what happens is this. If you don't laugh at the jokes, then I sing another chorus of the song. It's too late now, it's too late. And I know 150 choruses. She was a fishmonger, to be sure 'twas no wonder, for so were her father and mother before, and they both wheeled their barrow through the streets broad and narrow, crying cockles and muzzles, alive, alive, oh, come on, alive, alive, oh, alive, alive, oh, crying cockles and muzzles, alive, alive, oh. 6 months later, Mrs. Murphy went to visit her husband's grave. And when she got there, the headstone was beginning to tilt backwards. And she was very annoyed, very annoyed. And as she's going home, she found a pile of wire on the pavement. So she picks up this wire, nips back to the cemetery, and she wrapped this wire around the headstone, across the top of the grave, and tied it to a tree. And she thought, now that'll stop it from falling down till the workmen can come back and do the job properly. And that night, when all the pubs had shut, there was a couple of his old mates taking a shortcut across the cemetery, and one of them said, "Oh, be japers, He said, is that Murphy's grave over there? And the other one says, to be sure, so it is. Oh, he said, he must be doing well as he's had a telephone put in. She died of a fever, and no one could save her. And that was the end of sweet Molly Malone. The ghost wheels that barrow to the street, broad and narrow, crying cobbles and muzzles. Alive, alive, oh, come on, alive, alive. Ooh, ooh. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. You're not listening to the words, are you, Mr. Peters? You see, this girl's dead now, you know. She died in the last verse. So it's not her that's singing now, it's the ghost that's pushing the bloody barrow up and down. So can you play like a ghost, please? Thank you very much. Are you all ready now? Everybody's singing like ghosts. Are you ready? Put your pint down, missus. Everybody sing. Did you hear about the two queer ghosts trying to put the willies up each other? Just thought I'd mention it. Alive, alive, oh, alive, alive, oh. They're as bloody daft as me, this lot. Crying cockle and mutter. Alive, alive, oh. Thank you, music lovers. I always open up with an Irish song, because the first time I sang that song was an Irish girl working behind the bar, and she was so appreciative she couldn't do enough for me. She was sending me drinks over all night. I thought, aye, aye. I said, can I take you home after the show? She said, to be sure, to be sure. I said, shall I go and book a taxi? She said, to be sure, to be sure. So we get in the taxi. I said, you know, if I pay for this all the way to your place, I can't afford to pay for another one to bring me back, so do you think I could stay the night? She said, to be sure, to be sure. So I said to the taxi driver, as fast as you can, mate. And if you find a chemist still open, you'd better pull up. She says, what do you want a chemist for? I said, to be sure, to be sure. I like them daft Irish jokes, you know. Did you hear about the Irish fella came for a fortnight's holiday in Blackpool? After his holiday, he's in a taxi going back to Squires Gate Airport. And the taxi driver says, tell me, Paddy, he says, are you any good at conundrums? He says, oh, be Jabez, what's one of them? He says, a conundrum, it's like a riddle. I ask you a question, you've got to answer it. Oh, he says, well, I'll have a go at that, I'll have a go at that. So the taxi driver says, now, brothers and sisters, I have none, but I am looking at my father's son. He said, now, who am I looking at? And I said, oh, Jabez, says, it's too hard for me, his dad. He says, it's too hard for me, his dad. I don't know the answer to that. He says, who is it you're looking at? And the taxi driver says, it's me. I'm looking at myself in a mirror. He said, oh, Jabez, he says, that's ever so clever, his dad. He said, that's brilliant, his dad. That's ever so good, his dad. And he's obsessed with this conundrum. It's on his mind all the way back from Squires Gate to Dublin, which takes a couple of hours, you know, by air fungus. And eventually he's in a little pub on the outskirts of Dublin, and there's a mate of his at the bar, and he's still got this conundrum on his mind. So he says to this mate of his, he says, Michael, are you any good at these here conundrum things? He says, what's one of them? He says, I ask you a question and you got to answer it. So he says, well, I'll have a go at that, I'll have a go at that. So he says, brothers and sisters, I have none, but I am looking at my father's son. He said, now, who is it I'm looking at? And I said, oh, but I said, it's too hard for me as that. I don't know that. He said, what's the answer to that? And he said, it's a taxi driver over in Blackpool. I stopped at the garage on my way here tonight. They've got an Irish mechanic. Can you imagine that? An Irish mechanic. I said, will you have a look at the back of my car, see if the indicator's working? He said, yes, it is. No, it's not. Yes, it is. No, it's not. Yes, it is. No, it's not. Yes, it is. Did you hear about the little aeroplane flying over the mountains? It's only a small aeroplane. It's just got 4 passengers and the pilot. And the 4 passengers are a brain surgeon, a mountaineer, an Irishman, and a dwarf. This is not an Irish joke, it's a dwarf joke. And they're flying over the mountain, and the pilot comes into the back of the plane and he said, look, he said, I've got some terrible news for you. Some terrible news. He said, I've got to tell you that the engine's now broken down. He said, and I'm afraid we're going to crash. He said, and what's more, he says, here at the back of the plane, we've just got 4 parachutes. There's 5 of us. We've only got 4 parachutes, and I'm having one, and he put it on his back and jumped out. So the 4 passengers looked at each other and said, what are we going to do? 4 of us and 3 parachutes. So the brain surgeon stood up. He said, now look here. He said, I happen to be one of the most foremost brain surgeons in the world, and tonight I'm doing an extremely important and dangerous operation on one of the top politicians in the world who may be able to rescue us all from the economic crisis we're in at the moment. I must have one of those parachutes. And he went to the back, put one on, and jumped out. So the other 3 looked at each other, the mountaineer, the Irish fellow, and the dwarf, and said, now what are we going to do with 2 parachutes? And the Irishman stood up and he says, oh, be Jabus. He says, I just remembered I must be in London tonight. I've got to be at the BBC studios because I'm in the final of the Brain of Britain competition. And he went to the back, got a parachute, put it on his back and jumped out. So the other 2 looked at each other, the mountaineer and the dwarf, and they said, 1 parachute. And the dwarf says, well, you can have it. Go on, he said, you take it, you go, I'll go down with the plane. And the mountaineer says, that's damn good of you. Damn good of you. He says, how come? He says, well, he said, I'm not going to fight you for it. I'd stand no chance. No, he said, I'm not going to fight. He says, go on, you have it. And the mountaineer says, that's marvellous. And he went to the back of the plane. Hey, he said, there's 2 parachutes here. We can both go. And the dwarf said, 2 parachutes? That's He says, how come there's 2 parachutes? And the mountaineer said, it's the Brain of Britain. He's jumped out with my rucksack on his back. That's what I like, them daft Irish jokes, you know. The phone rings in this beautiful blonde's house. She picks up the phone and a little voice said, this is an anonymous phone call. Paddy Murphy speaking. Oh, the phone rings and the fellow answers at the other end and the voice said, is that Dublin 4444? And he said, no, this is Dublin 4444. He said, oh, I'm very sorry to trouble you. He said, it's all right, the phone was ringing anyway. I was over in Dublin, you know. I did a commercial once for Irish television. You know Erasmic shaving cream? Well, Erasmic were doing this new, very scented, highly perfumed shaving cream. And I had to go on the streets in Dublin with a mic and a camera and ask people what they thought about it, you see, which wasn't a very good idea. The first day we went in O'Connell Street and I stopped this guy and I said, excuse me, sir, but have you ever smelt Erasmic? He said, I'd rather not if you don't mind. I said, I don't fancy that. You'll learn a lot listening to my act, you know. My act is more educational than entertaining. It's quite true. I'm well known in show business as doing an educational act. It's quite true. When you go out tonight, you'll say, well, that taught me a bloody lesson. Quite true. My Yiddish mama, I miss her more than ever now. My Yiddish mama, I'd love to kiss her wrinkled brow. I long to hold her hand once more, as in days gone by, and ask her to forgive me for the things I did which made her cry. How few were her pleasures. She never craved for fashion styles. Her jewels and her treasures, she found them in her baby's smile. And I know that I owe what I am today to that wonderful lady, so old and so gray, to that wonderful Yiddish mama, mama of mine. My Yiddish mama, I miss her more than ever now. My Yiddish mama, I'd love to kiss her wrinkled brow. I long to hold her hand once more, as in days gone by, and ask her to forgive me for the things I did which made her cry. How few were pleasures. She never craved for fashion styles. Her jewels and her treasures, she found them in her baby's smile. And I know that I owe what I am today to that wonderful lady, so old and so gray, to that wonderful Yiddish mama, mama of mine. Thank you, Becky. Very nice, Becky. Did you about the Jewish couple came out of the Tesco's and they're pushing the pram down the street, and all of a sudden Becky screamed, "Abby, this is not our baby." He says, "Shut up, it's a better pram." Did you hear about the Jewish fella swallowed a £5 note? And every time he went to the loo, he ran a raffle? I like the daft Jewish jokes, but also some very nice ones. You know, the one Jewish joke I always like is Becky goes to her next-door neighbour, and she says, "Listen, I'm very worried." She says, "What are you worried about, Becky?" She says, "What am I worried about?" She said, 2 weeks ago already. At 2 o'clock on an afternoon, there's a knock on the door. I open the door, there's this boy, this beautiful boy. 6 foot tall, blonde hair, blue eyes, beautiful boy. He says, "Is Abe in?" I says, "Abe is never in at 2 o'clock on an afternoon." And this boy pushes me in the house, he locks the door, he gets me on the floor, he makes mad, passionate love for half an hour, then he goes. I'm very worried. She says, "What you worried for, Becky?" She says, "What am I worried for? Listen, every day now for 2 weeks already. Every day now at 2 o'clock every afternoon, there's a knock on the door. Every day I open the door, there's this same beautiful boy. Blonde hair, blue eyes, beautiful boy. Every day he says to me, "Is Abe in?" And I always say, "Abe is not in. He's never in at 2 o'clock on an afternoon." And he pushes me in the house, he locks the door, he has me on the floor, he makes mad, passionate love for half an hour, then he goes. He's doing this every day now. I'm very worried. She says, "What you worried for?" She says, "What am I worried for? What's he want Abe for?" I like them daft jokes. Did you hear about the Jewish Father Christmas? Came down the chimney, tipped over to the bed and said to the kids, "Do you want to buy some toys?" Or the German Father Christmas, playing hell with his reindeer. "Rudolph, I told you to take me to the Smith house." I remember when I was a kid, you know, we were not very well off, you know, very poor. And in fact, the first time I saw a butcher's, I thought there'd been an accident. And at our house, we thought knives and forks were jewellery. And at Christmas time, we never had a turkey. We used to have a roast octopus. Not much meat on it, but at least we all got a leg. How about the blind fella goes into the social assistance office? And he said, "I want some assistance." He said, "I can't manage on £14 a week." They said, "Are you married?" He said, "Of course I'm married." He said, "Any children?" He said, "I've got 26 kids." They said, "A blind man and 26 kids?" He said, "Can I see what I'm doing?" Woman goes in the doctor's. She says, "I want 3 teeth out." He said, "Sit in the chair and get ready." She sat in the chair. He turned in the corner to get his instruments ready. Turned round and she sat in the chair with no blouse on. He said, "What are you taking your blouse off for? I thought you wanted 3 teeth out." She said, "I do. There's 2 in this one and 1 in that." Fella, 82-year-old, goes to the doctor's. He says, "I want to get married to a girl of 18. The doctor says, "This could be fatal." He said, "Well, if she dies, she dies." He married this girl, and within a fortnight, he was dead himself. Brand new disease called ecstasy. Took them a week to get the smile off his face. And another fortnight to get the coffin lid down. I always remember my wedding, you know. I always remember my wedding. Week before Easter, I said, "Come on, let's get married." She said, "We can't get married the week before Easter." I said, "Why not?" She says, "Well, it's Lent." I thought, blimey, can't you give it back? We had a nudist wedding. 200 people in church with no clothes on. When they sat down, it sounded like a round of applause. I think it's a good idea, that. I think everybody who gets married in future ought to have nudist weddings, everybody in church with no clothes on. Then everybody can see who's best man. Did you hear about the fella up in court charged with statutory rape? And they said, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty? He said, not guilty. I didn't know it was a statue. The magistrate says, have you been up before me before? He said, I don't know. What time do you get up? Fella goes to the doctor. He said, doctor, he said, I keep losing my temper over nothing at all. And the doctor said, how do you mean? He said, I bloody told you once! Fella goes into the cobbler's. He said, I want my boots. He said, have you got a ticket? He said, I've lost the ticket. He said, when did you bring them in? He said, November the 5th, 1933. He said, you've got to be joking. He said, I'm not. He said, I bought my boots in this shop November the 5th, 1933. He said, this shop's changed hands a dozen times since then. He said, I don't care, I've got to have them. I'm starting work on Monday. The fella says, wait on, there's a pile of shoes downstairs. I'll go and have a look. And it disappears in a cloud of dust downstairs. And it comes back half an hour later. He said, I found them. I've got them, they're here. He said, they'll be ready on Thursday. Now, I thought myself here in the National Youth Orchestra, we thought we'd sing you a serious number dedicated to all the ladies in the audience, and it's entitled, If the Chain is Still Swinging, Then the Seat Must Be Warm. Caviar comes from the virgin sturgeon. The virgin sturgeon is a very fine fish. The virgin sturgeon needs no urging. That's why caviar is my dish. Da da diddle 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 ding. Dancers, well, you didn't know that, did you? 3 pigs went to a party, got bored and went home. Muffin the mule isn't illegal. You can do it if you want. I gave caviar to the vicar. He teaches us of wrong and sin. I don't know where he goes when Sunday school is over, but he's looking pale and thin. Da, da, diddle, 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 ding. Did you hear about the new breakfast cereal in the shops? New breakfast cereal called Prostitutes. Didn't go snack, crackle, pop, it just lays there in banks. I gave caviar to Mick Jagger. He's the one that moans and groans. Now he's had the opera. 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 You never know, do you? I'll do an easy one for the ladies. Easy one for the ladies. These 2 mice were talking. And one mouse said to the other mouse, who do you think's got the best legs? Sophie Loren or Bridget Bardot? And the other mouse said, I couldn't care less. I'm a titmouse. Caviar comes from the virgin sturgeon. The virgin sturgeon is a very fine fish. The virgin sturgeon needs no urging. That's why caviar is my dish. And I thought this time that we would open up with an old English folk song. Can you play an old English folk song, please? Down in Piccadilly, There are naughty women, they will do whatever you want. If you've got a shilling, soldiers half a crown, sailors half a guinea, big fat men £2.10, little boys a penny. That's what we'll do, daft jokes like that. I got off the train tonight, jumped in this minicab. Little minicab, little mini. Woman at the wheel. I said, take me to the nearest brothel. She says, you're in it. How about the Australian fella down the road opened a pub, put all his mementos from Australia all over the wall. This young, long-haired lobbo goes in, gets bevied, pinched a boomerang off the wall, shoved it up his jumper. Then he got so bevied that the landlord had to kick him out 17 times. Speedy Gonzales said to this girl, he says, can I? She says, will it hurt? He said, did it? Fella on the building site, the foreman on the building site is fed up with this deaf fella. He's always so slow, so slow. So the foreman said, I'll sack him. And he stood at the bottom of the ladder and he shouts up to the top of the building. He says, hey up, you're sacked. He says, you what? He says, you're sacked. He says, you what? Come on, get your cards, you're sacked. You what? You're sacked. You what? Never mind, I'll sack somebody else. Fella goes in the pub, his mate says, you don't look very happy. He says, I'm not, I've just been to the doctors, he's told me I've only got 6 weeks to live. He says, well, cheer up, it'll soon pass. I think death is nature's way of telling you to slow down. You know? I met an American this afternoon. I said, what do you call you? He said, my name is Tex. I said, you come from Texas? He said, no, Louisiana, but I prefer Tex, if you don't mind. A fella fell off Blackpool Tower, bang, right on the prom. And a crowd gathered round him like that, hundreds of them. And a policeman pushed his way through and he looked down at this fella. He says, what happened? And the fella looked up, he said, I don't know, I just got here myself. The wife says to me, you don't look very happy. I said, I'm homesick. She says, this is your home. I said, I know, I'm bloody sick of it. She's a funny woman. Funny woman, I got home yesterday, she was crying her eyes out. I said, what are you crying for? She said, dog's eating your dinner. I said, well, don't worry, I'll get you another dog. When I get home tonight, I'm going to rip the wife's knickers off. I've got to, they're bloody killing me. Now, what we should have done tonight, we should have all gone to the pictures. We could have gone to see that X film, you know, with, shouldn't we? Play some X film music. You know the one I'm talking about, don't you? Mr. and Mrs. Hill from Wigan went on a motoring tour of Germany. And one night, in the middle of the Black Forest, Mr. and Mrs. Hill from Wigan were driving through the Black Forest and the car broke down. So they got out of the car and they started walking through the night, through the Black Forest. And then all of a sudden they saw a little light. So they walked towards this light, through the night, through the Black Forest. And eventually they reached this light, which was a window in a big castle. And they walked up to the door and they pulled on the chain. And the door creaked open and there was the butler, 9'13", 6 foot across and a bolt through his neck. And he said, you rang? And they said, yes, we're Mr. and Mrs. Hill from Wigan. And our car's broken down in the middle of this bloody big wood. We can't find the phone box anywhere. And can you put us up for tonight so we can ring the AA in the morning. He said, come in. They took them into the castle and downstairs into the cellar. Because if you notice in these X films, these castles have never got any upstairs, have they? They're all bloody cellars. And he said, you can sleep here in these coffins. And Mrs. Hill said, oh, well, there must be posh undertakers or something. So Mr. and Mrs. Hill from Wigan jumped in a coffin each, and off they went to sleep. And in the middle of the night, the door creaked open, and there was Count Dracula. And he had a wooden stake in one hand and a hammer in the other. And he went over to Mrs. Hill's coffin, and he hammered a wooden stake all the way through her heart. Then he went over to Mr. Hill's coffin, and he hammered a wooden stake all the way through his heart. And the two of them were there, deaded. And Count Dracula went over to his old-fashioned pipe organ in the cellar, and he played weird music on the organ. Weird music on the organ. And he played the music so loud, the two corpses sat up in their coffins and they sang. The hills are alive with the sound of music. Can you imagine, and 100 years from now, Manchester is the capital of the world, and there is a United Nations meeting at the Piccadilly Plaza. And the President of America is stood at the bar with the President of Russia, and they're having a drink. And one of them says at the cocktail bar, he said, now, he said, would you like a drink? He said, what would you like? He said, well, I don't know. He said, just a moment. He said, what's that you've got on your wrist? He said, this. He said, it's a wristwatch. He says, a wristwatch? He says, they're a bit quaint, aren't they? A bit old-fashioned for you to be wearing. He said, well, he says, I like antiques and things, you know. He said, years ago, people had to have watches like this to tell the time. He said, I know nowadays we know the time automatically. He said, but years ago, he said, everybody had these on the wrist, you know. He said, I'm sort of a sentimentalist. He said, and I rather like antiques and things. That's why he says it's called a wristwatch, yes. He said, well, do you know, he says, I collect antiques. He said, I don't tell anyone, of course. He said, I'll show you this. And the President of Russia, he said, now look at this. He says, look at that flick. You see, and a light comes. He said, it's what they used to call a cigarette lighter. And the President of America says, I used to hear about those. I've heard about them. He says, yes, he says, people used to smoke, you know, cigarettes and things. And he said, it wiped out half the population before they hatched on, you know. He said, but he said, they used to... He said, they used to light them with these things. You just press that button there and a little light. You see how that light comes? It's a cigarette lighter. He said, well, it's just a little antique. I thought, he says, that's very nice. He said, now what shall we have to drink? And the bartender said, well, look, he said, if you don't mind... me suggesting, he says, I just happened to overhear the conversation. He says, now I've got an antique at the back here. He says, would you like me to show you? And they said, yes, certainly. And the bartender said, well, look, he said, you know, if you want a gin, we'd press a button. If you want a cocktail, we'd press a button. He said, but in the old days, 100 years ago, they used to mix cocktails with this, a cocktail shaker. He said, really? He said, yes. He says, we used to have to put everything in by hand and shake it up, and that's how he said, I tell you what, he says, it still works. It still works. He says, would you like me to make you a cocktail using this old-fashioned cocktail shaker instead of the... Oh, they said, that would be lovely. Oh, that would be lovely. So the bartender unscrewed the top of the cocktail shaker and he pressed a button, and a little bit of this, pressed another button, a little bit of that, and another button, a little bit of that, another button, a little bit of ice, another button, a little bit of soda, and he put the top on and he started shaking it up here, down there, shaking it behind his head, shaking it down there, shaking it all over the place. And the Russian president said to the American president, I say, haven't these white fellas got a bloody good sense of rhythm? Little lad goes to school and the teacher said, now I want you to tell me, she said, what do you know about sex? She said, what is sex? So this little lad says, well, sex. Well, if you're having your tea at home, if you're having your tea at home, and a fly flies on a piece of sugar, and another fly flies on that fly's back, that's sex. She said, very good. He says, and if you're in the countryside, and you're in a field, and there's a cow in a field, and another cow jumps on that cow's back, that's sex. She said, very good. He says, and if you're watching television at home, and the Cheyenne riding across the prairie, and an Indian jumps on his back, that's sex. She says, that isn't sex at all. He says, I know it's not, I'm only kidding. Says it'd take more than one Indian to do Cheyenne. I like the daft things the kids come out with. Mammy, where did I come from? You sweet little thing, I got you out of the sugar bowl. Daddy, my mammy says I came out of a sugar bowl. Aye, that's about the bloody size of it, lad, that's about it. Oh, you've got it now, have you? You've got it. We should have gone to the pictures. We could have gone to see Big Chief Sitting Bull. Have you seen that? It's all about this Indian chief sitting bull and his wife lying cow. And this Indian chief took the part in the Civil War of the Confederates. And there, in a little farmhouse, miles away from anywhere, was this little widow woman. And one day, the Confederate army came and took her son away. And they made him fight in the Civil War. He didn't want to go, but he'd got to go. But she knew one day her son would come back. And she never gave up hope. She tended the chickens and she looked after the farm and she kept the house clean. And she knew one day her son would come home. But the years went on, and the war finished, and there was no sign of her son, but she never gave up hope. She knew one day he'd come back. And 7 years after the end of the war, she's getting too old to do very much on the farm. She just dusts around and she spends most of her time sitting on the porch on a rocking chair. And that's where she was all those years after the end of the war, still waiting for her son. Then one day she saw a speck on the horizon and she said, "It's my boy. It's my boy. Come on home, son. Come on home, son. I knew you'd come home to your mama. Come on home, son. It's all yours now. I've kept it all for you. Come on home, son. Come." It doesn't matter, it's not him. It's somebody else. I was at the airport the other day and there was a vicar in front of me going to Pittsburgh in America. Him and his wife. This airport girl selling the ticket, she'd got one of the most revealing blouses I've ever seen. One of these very low cut. And the vicar went up to the counter and this girl, bent down to pick up some papers and one of them... And she was ever so embarrassed and she just flipped it back. And she said, I'm sorry, Vicar, if I embarrassed you. He said, I never noticed a thing. She says, can I do anything for you? He says, yes, I want 2 pickets to Pittsburgh, please. Flo's enjoying yourself, aren't you, Flo? Where do you come from, Flo? Openshaw. I remember Openshaw, you know, when it was all green fields and cows. All the fields have gone, haven't they? He said, now, don't talk about politics. I think politics are too serious to do jokes about. But I remember years ago I was brought up in Barnsley. Now, Barnsley is a very staunch Labour place. Always has been, always will be, I suppose. This is a true story, this. It's not a joke, so you can dance if you like. Come on. 82-year-old, this fella, and he was laid on his deathbed in Barnsley. So one of his oldest friends went to visit him, and he said, is there anything I can do for you? He says, there is. He says, I want thee to fetch me secretary at local Labour Party, and I want you to fetch me secretary at local Conservatives. He says, what does I want to be bothered with then, Pop? He says, I'm going to resign from Labour Party, and I'm going to join Conservatives. He says, what does I want to do a daft thing like that for? That's been a member at Labour Party ever since it started. He says, I know I have. But I know I'm going to D. So I'd rather one of theirs went than one of ours. You watch that Kung Fu? You watch that? He gets me, that Kung Fu. He goes in a different town every week. He'll walk up to somebody, he'll go bang in the neck, bang in the stomach, bang! Then he'll say, I come in peace. Then the one of the baddies comes towards him, pulls a gun out, and we're all in China. There's that young lad talking to the bald-headed fellow with the faulty contact lenses. Master, which come first, the chicken or the egg? Grasshopper. It is written, baby who dirties nappy whilst being weighed is destined to do business on a big scale. It is also written, chicken must come before egg, for it is easier for chicken to push backwards than for egg to push forward. And before we can reply, we're all back in the Wild West again. And a little lad pulling on his jacket. Mr. Kane, how come you can fight every man in this town? Son, it is written. When you speak as much crap as I do, you have got to be a bloody good fighter. Now, when I came in tonight, there was a fellow at the bar, and he said, look, he said, I've written a song, and I was wondering, will you sing this song in the show? So I said, no. He said, oh, words to that effect. And I turned around, and the gaffer was stood behind me, and he said, now, look, if someone's written a song, we should encourage people to write songs, and someone ought to sing it. The reason I'm telling you this is because this next song is a bit corny, and I don't want you to think I wrote the damn thing because I didn't. What is this? Young fellow is sat over there, and he works in the fire brigade. Young fellow works in the fire brigade down the road, and he's written a song all about the fire brigade. Fancy writing a song about... Anyway, I was done. Now, don't show him up. He's never written a song before, and he said if you like this one, he's going to send it away. And I think that's a bloody good idea. A little song all about the fire brigade, and it goes like this. Running up the ladder with me squirter, they all jump. No, don't laugh, don't laugh. Shh. Shh, don't laugh, he's sat over there. Shh. Running up the ladder with me squirter, they all shout fire, fire, fire. When the old fire bell goes, I'm on the job with me little bit of hose. They all... Now that's not very nice, is it? Here's a man so proud of his job, has written a song about it, and you'll not take the mickey. Try it again and ignore these people that are laughing. Running up the ladder with me squirter, they all shout fire, fire, fire. When the old fire bell goes, I'm on the job with me little bit of hose. They all say I'm a hero, my courage they admire. But I nearly dropped the lot when me nozzle got so hot, shouting fire, 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 fire. That's what I was supposed to do tonight, sing songs. They didn't want me to tell jokes. They said, will you go on and do half an hour straight singing? So I got all my music ready, and I came upstairs and I had a pint at the bar, and I heard the band, and I thought, good God. It's all right, you can say what you like, they can't hear me. Can't hear me. Can't. They all play by ear and they're all bloody deaf. It's true. They think I'm singing now, you know. I'm going to do the song in a minute. The song. Isn't it a pity? They said, don't take the mick out of the band, they work hard. They work for a hospital during the day. They make people sick. I mean, they should have a good sound. They've been playing with each other long enough. I like the one in the middle, always got a smile on his face. I think it's something to do with the size of his instrument. Have you seen the drummer's glasses? Looks like a Japanese sniper. You shouldn't laugh, missus, you shouldn't laugh. Half an inch thick, them lenses. Half an inch. You must have bloody good eyesight to see through them. The pianist is very good to his wife. He never goes home. He didn't. Sex mad is missus. Sex mad. I met her once. I said, if you weren't you, who would you like to be? She says, I'd like to be Sarah Pippolini. I said, who the hell's Sarah Pippolini? She says, it's in the paper all about her. And I looked in the paper and it said, Sahara Pipeline. Laid by 400 men in one day. But I thought, despite the National Youth Orchestra here, someone's got to add a little culture to this show. So I intend to sing for you a serious number made famous by the late King of Swing, Albert Pierpoint. Now, this number was featured in the film South Pacific, in the part of the film where Rosanna Brazier fell in love with Ronnie Corbett. You remember that part where he tried to squeeze his grapefruit? You remember? Serious number, and it's entitled Some Enchanted Evening. Some enchanted evening, You may see a stranger. You may see a stranger across a crowded room, and somehow you know even then, that somewhere you'll meet her again and again. Some enchanted evening, you may hear her laughing. You may hear her laughing across a crowded room. And night after night, as strange as it seems, the sound of her laughter will ring through your dreams. Who can explain it? Who can tell you why? Fools give you reasons, wise men never try. Some enchanted evening, you may find your true love. You may hear her call you up across a crowded room. So fly to her side and make her your own, or all through your life you may dream all alone. Once you have found her, never let her go. Once you have found her, never